Hey, what's up? This is Mikey for Blue Monkey Bicycles, and I've got some e-bike news for you. Rad Power is being sued for bad design, and there's one detail that the whole case could pivot on. But really, the ghost of bicycle lawsuits past has come back to haunt us. So first up, thankfully, the person that was involved in the crash that started this lawsuit, it appears he's going to be okay. The injuries were 5 broken ribs and a broken clavicle. People have died on electric bike injuries in the past, so this is a bit of good news to start things off. Now, according to Mr. Gary Mason, last May he was riding along and used his brakes on the Rad Power bike to avoid a turning car. He was thrown over the handlebars and even noticed the front wheel flying through the air. Now, according to the documents obtained by classaction.org, Gary E. Mason versus Rad Power Bikes Incorporated and Rad Power Bikes LLC, it says in part, quote, "The combination of Rad's e-bike's heavyweight bike fork design with quick-release skewers and quick-release parts results in a hazardous and patently unsafe design on all Rad e-bikes, the defective e-bikes. Now, as a result of the defendant's faulty design, the heavier than usual weight of the bikes, and the fork design with quick-release skewers, the defect, many riders, such as plaintiff Gary Mason, have experienced catastrophic malfunctions." Now, the suit goes on to accuse that the design is defective and causes a list of problems, including what they're calling, quote, "even complete dismantling of the bike." Now, the claim is bolstered not only by forum and Reddit posts on the internet, but it also brings up a 2015 recall, not for Rad Power, but for another company, and claims that Rad Power acted against what they're calling, quote, "long-standing industry-wide consensus." Now, the suit goes on to describe more aspects that they believe are unsafe getting towards their class action status. They list the kid seats that could be unsafe or the age of the users. Now, of course, they also made mention that Rad Power has scored some recent funding, but really they're casting a pretty wide net, not just for what happened to Mr. Mason. Now, I was initially dismissive of some of these claims, but there is some history to it. The lawsuit describes a recall performed in 2015 which covered a wide variety of U.S. bike brands, such as Specialized, Giant, Felt, and many more. In total, CPSC.gov estimates that this recall covered 1.3 million bikes. Now, the lawsuit states that more than 2.5 million bikes were included in that recall, but they must be adding that up over time because I couldn't quite find that in the source material that they provided in the suit. Anyways, I've put those in the description below if you want to comb through and let me know what I have missed. But what's really interesting is the 1.3 million bike recall. That covered a bunch of company, and it boils down to the front quick release coming unhinged, and the handle of the lever comes into contact with the disc on the brake. Now, that creates a sudden stop of the bike while simultaneously allowing the front wheel to fall off. Now, if that sounds familiar, that's pretty much exactly what happened to Mr. Mason. Now, this issue actually has been around the block a few times. For some 20 years, this issue, the combination of a front quick release with the disc brake, it's been bouncing around from independent experts, bike companies, and the CPSC itself. Now, looking back through the years, some interesting opinions on the matter have come from Sheldon Brown, the late bicycle expert who listed tomes of information on the newfangled internet. He called the extra metal being formed on the bottom of the fork dropouts lawyer lips, saying that they not only prevented frivolous lawsuits, but also encouraged parts companies to make substandard skewers on account of the extra precaution. So clearly there have been lawsuits in the past about this exact issue if a remedy has already made its way to the bike industry at large, and they even have a cute little nickname. Now, this has been going on for quite a long time, as lawsuit after lawsuit has been going to bike companies and component companies, including to this very day. I mean, that's what we're talking about right now. In the case of Mr. Mason versus Rad Power, this could be seen as cut and dry from both sides. Since the issue has been going on forever, Rad Power very well could have sourced a different part or a different part combination, especially considering that their bikes undergo additional stress from heavier loads and higher top speeds. But on the other hand, in many cases, probably most cases, Rad Power does not put the front tire onto the bike physically. That the customer is responsible for when they complete the final assembly at home. Now, Rad Power does have a few brick and mortar stores, and they also have partner businesses and even mobile service, However, the lawsuit does not specify who put the wheel on Mr. Mason's bike. Now, by the way, I found it interesting that the lawsuit expands the scope of the crisis to child passengers, and the lawsuit sources photos from Rad Power's site. It just so happens that all those pictures of kids on the bike happen to be when the bike is very clearly stationary and not moving. So it looks like Rad Power's legal team did some really good work on that one. Now, speaking of good legal work, it also just so happens that Gary E. Mason from the Washington, D.C. area is an attorney at law. Now, assuming this is the same Gary E. Mason from the incident in question, then it appears that our plaintiff in the class action lawsuit is also, quote, nationally recognized leader of the class action bar, focusing on consumer class actions and mass torts. Now, indeed, I applaud this fellow's work with TikTok because that's a totally messed up situation. But does Rad Power deserve the same kind of professional touch, we'll say? Now, there is one thing that most people don't realize about the U.S. electric bike industry. I'm going to guess that Mr. Mason doesn't know it quite either, and that is that the bike industry is completely rife with small companies, DIY CEOs, and company headcounts that are only on one hand. Now, I've had the pleasure of visiting bike companies, manufacturers, designers, testers, and it never ceases to amaze me how small the majority of USA bike companies actually are. So there are other big ones like Trek or Specialized and big box stores, but that's not where Rad Power got their roots. In the lawsuit itself, it notes that Rad Power was started by a teenager. Now, I happen to know that during times of critical expansion for Rad Power, meaning the early 2010s, the bicycle industry did not embrace electric bikes or people who liked them either. It shunned them. Now, during this same time, I got started in electric bikes, and I remember it very well. Bike companies treated e-bikes and their riders like heretics. Going into a bike store to make friends in the industry was like Pee-wee walking into the biker bar. I personally believe that there is a high likelihood that Rad Power did not know about the finer details of bicycle manufacture and design at that time, especially the long-standing lawyer lips fiasco. But really, the Chinese companies who make parts for Rad Power, who they buy their stuff from, they're not going to tell their client, Rad Power, about all of this, and the reality is they don't know. These bike companies don't possibly know all the different laws in all these countries, and to be truthful, the bike industry in the USA actually represents a very small portion of the global total, so they're not going to know. But there is one problem with this analysis, and I've left it out on purpose, and that's good old Father Time. Rad Power is not in the DIY bike company phase any longer. The lawsuit itself reiterates that Rad Power has hundreds of employees, approached $100 million in sales, and scored $329 million in funding since their inception. Now, it stands to reason that someone in the 18-year history of this company has pointed out the potential problem that this component combination could cause. I mean, Rad Power's own site says that they have rad scientists on the team, which one would hope they would have heard about this issue. But really, that's going to be difficult to prove that Rad Power knew about this ahead of time, because it's not the sort of thing that gets written down. This component set, a disc brake and a front quick release, it is still very, very common. Electric and non-electric bikes have been using this set of components, this very combination, whether the lever goes to 180 degrees or not, and they're all over the place. So to say that Rad Power ignored, quote, long-standing industry-wide consensus, that's not exactly right, because there's also a long-standing industry practice of still using that set of parts. But I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below, and feel free to comb through the sources that I have put in the description. I'm Mikey for Blue Monkey Bicycles, and I will see you on later.